And by controlling the supply of diamonds...
Hi there, in this After Effects tutorial, we're going to animate a camera sequence in the MagnatesMedia style.
And by controlling the supply of diamonds, they could completely manipulate the prices. De Beers also pulled off one of the most successful marketing cons
So,
ever.
if you want to master this editing style, stick around and watch the tutorial until the end, because I'm going to explain everything step by step. By the way, if you like documentary-style editing, my course is now available. But it's not just a course in which I show you how to animate a sequence in After Effects and that's it. But I show you the entire procedure that I followed to create this animation. From the initial idea to the final render, going through each and every phase of the creative process. I'll leave the link in the description in case you want to take a look. Okay, so let's get started. As always, the first thing we're going to do is import the files. First, these first three. Go back to File, Import, and now we're going to import this Photoshop file called Scene Characters. This one isn't necessary because it's the same file as the one in this image. We're just going to import this one. By the way, if you want to support the channel, in addition to your likes, you can also do it from my Patreon page. There, I share with you all the projects I use in the tutorials, so you can keep practicing and learning. I leave the link in the description if you want to take a look. Here, we choose Composition. And to keep everything organized, let's open the order script, which our friend Zavat shares with us for free. I'll leave the link in the description in case you want to download it. And with a simple click, it organizes everything into folders. Images, compositions, Photoshop files, and video files. This composition is the one that was automatically generated when we imported the Photoshop files. Okay, so now, starting with this layer called Diamond, we're going to create a new composition. We're not going to do anything here. We'll leave it as is and save it in its folder. With it selected, we create a new composition called Animation. 1920 by 1080 pixels. At 30 frames and 15 seconds is enough. Here, we'll bring in the diamond image and also place this other image below it. If we want, we'll disable the eye for the diamond image, and we'll convert the one below to 3D. If the cube icon doesn't appear, we'll display it with F4. We'll also lower the scale quite a bit, for example, to 55. And on the y-axis, we're also going to move it down a little bit. Okay, that's perfect. Now, right-click, create an adjustment layer. We'll call this Distortion. We'll add the effect called Displacement Map. Here we can already see that it's starting to do something, but it's not what we want. What we want is for it to distort based on the diamond shape. So in this option, we choose the diamond composition. Now it looks much better, but we need to make some more adjustments. Here I'm going to set the horizontal shift to 30 and the vertical shift to 50. That's enough. Look how cool the effect looks. Let's continue. Let's bring back the diamond composition and place it up here. We're going to convert this into an adjustment layer by clicking on this icon, and all the effects we apply to this composition will affect the layer below, again using the diamond shape as a reference. We're going to add the effect called Quick Chromatic Aberration, a plugin that doesn't come by default in After Effects, but it's completely free. I'll also leave the link in the description. If we increase this value, we can see that the effect only applies to the diamond shape. The problem is that it's too much. We'll leave it at, for example, 3, so that the chromatic aberration effect is very subtle. We're also going to add a tint effect. But we need to place it on top, so both work correctly. To highlight the diamond a little more, let's bring back this composition and set it to Add mode. We'll lower the opacity a bit, to 50%, for example. Okay, so it looks much better there. Now, right-click. Create a 35mm camera and a node. Again, right-click, New Null Object. We'll also convert it to 3D and parent the camera to it. At the beginning of the timeline, we display the position and set a keyframe. And now, at second 510, we zoom in slightly. I'm going to set the custom view to 1 so it looks better. Basically, what we're going to do is move the camera back along the Z-axis using this null. We'll set a value of negative 3,320 here and soften these 2 keyframes. Don't worry about those empty edges here, because we'll fix that later. Well, actually, we'll do it right away. We select this layer and add the effect called CC Repeat. Here, what we need to do is expand the pixels to all sides. Now, from Repeat, we change to Unfold, and that's it, it's solved. While here on this last keyframe, we'll bring in the layer called Diamond 2. We'll place it here, convert it to 3D, and without moving the head, unfold the position and mark a keyframe. Maybe we'll move it down a little. Here in Y, we'll set it to 670. And now at the beginning of the timeline, we'll move it up a little, so it's centered in the composition. We'll set a value of 470. And we'll also smooth these 2 keyframes with F9. Now, we select these 4 and give them a little bit of shape. We can set this one to, say, 60%, and the other 2 to 70%, more or less. That's about right. Let's preview it to see how it looks. Well, before we preview it, we need to do a little animation to the opacity of the diamond layer, so it doesn't show up here at first. We'll go to the second 2 and set the opacity to 0. We'll mark a keyframe, and from the second 2, we'll move to the 4th, and here we'll set the opacity back to 100. We'll select them and soften them with F9. Okay, so it looks great there. But to give this diamond a little more luminosity, we'll duplicate the layer. We'll set this one to screen mode. Perfect. Let's make one more copy, Control D, and we'll rename this one. It'll be called Diamond Matte, and we'll use it to make the transition. We'll set the blending mode back to normal and also apply the fill effect. Continue. Now we're at the second 10. And as you can see, the diamond layer that ends here is no longer visible in the composition. So let's do the following. Right-click, Time, and activate Time Remapping. Now we extend the layer for the entire duration of the composition. And in these, the same. Right-click, Time, enable Time Remapping. Extend, right-click, Time, activate Time Remapping. Okay, but something else happens. When we reach this keyframe, the animation stops, so we need to add an expression. Holding down the Alt key, we click on the time remapping clock, and here we type loop out. Right-click, copy only the expression, and paste it to this layer with Control V. And to this one above, the same with Control V. Now the diamond will continue to animate for the entire duration of the composition. As I said, we're here at the 10th second. Well, first we have to duplicate the null. Control D and press U to show the keyframes. We delete these two and mark a new one at the second 5 to 10. We have to parent the previous null to the new one. And now we advance to the second 10. Here we're going to do the opposite of what we did before. If we were moving away with the camera before, now we're going to zoom in. Look, you can see it much better there. Now we're going to zoom in until this red diamond occupies the entire space of the composition. We're going to set it to Z 960 here. We select the keyframes, smooth them, and give them a little shape to the curve. Here we're going to set it, for example, to 65 or so. And for this one, we'll set the influence to 70. That's fine. From the last keyframe, we're going to bring in the Photoshop files. We're going to place this one below the camera. We convert the layer to 3D, and with Control plus Home, center it in the view. What does this mean by centering the view? Well, when you press Control plus Home, it's placed right in front of the camera viewfinder. Look here where the camera is, here the viewfinder, because the Photoshop file is right in front of the viewfinder. The thing is, we can't see it because it's behind these 3 layers. Look where we have them, so we can't see this one. I'm going to leave these 2 alone to better see what we're doing. We're going to set this layer of the Photoshop file as the matte alpha for the diamond layer. If the track mattes don't appear, use F4 to unfold them. And now use Pick Whip to parent it to this layer. Okay, perfect. Notice how our transition is starting to take shape here. But if we reactivate all the layers, we'll have the same problem as before. These two here, which are in the center, won't let us see the Photoshop file layer. We'll fix this very easily. Right-click, create an adjustment layer, and place this adjustment layer below the diamond matte layer. What we get with this is, as if we were saying, we've separated the 3D space into two different ones. So, the layers above this one no longer interact with those below it. Okay? But we also need to animate the opacity of this Photoshop file, so it's not visible at first. We position ourselves more or less at this point, press T, and set the opacity to 0. We mark a keyframe and move forward a little. Around here, we return the opacity to 100. We also soften these two keyframes with F9. I'm going to keep just these two layers to better see what we're doing. Now, to add the background, I'm going to duplicate this Photoshop file, Ctrl+D, and select the lower copy. Holding down the Alt key, we select the background layer and replace it with this one. Okay, so there you can see our background. The thing is, we need to make some adjustments to these layers. For example, we're going to scale the character layer down a bit. We'll set it to 60, and we'll also move it slightly down the y-axis. Here, we'll set it to 650. And maybe also a little to the left, so it fits well in the composition. We'll set the X to 920. There you go. Now, to create the parallax effect between the background layer and the character layer, we have to send it backward on the Z-axis. Let's activate two views to see it better. Select the Z-axis here and move it towards the background. As always, we'll set exact values. Here we set it to 2310. We'll leave the scale more or less around that. Okay, perfect. Now we can activate all the layers again, and let's preview it to see how it looks. Okay, this looks great. We can add a little blur to this last layer to give the scene more depth. We place it below this keyframe. And on this layer, right-click, New Adjustment Layer. We'll call this layer Blur and apply the Gaussian blur effect. As I said, below this keyframe, we'll set a value of 15, for example. Notice how the scene blurs a bit, focusing more attention on the diamond. We mark a keyframe. And now at this point, we return the value to 0. Press U, and if we want, we can soften it with F9. Okay, with the color correction and some adjustments still to go, we're almost there. Let's do a full preview to see how it looks. Let's start by applying the tint effect to this layer. If you want, you can also lighten the shadows and darker areas a bit. I'm going to leave it as it is by default, so it looks black and white. We're also going to add a couple of effects to the character layer. First, some curves to give it a bit of contrast. And also to darken the shadows and darker areas a bit. We're also going to add an effect called tritone. And I'm going to lighten the midtones a bit. Well, if you want to use the same one I did, here's the code. We'll copy this tritone effect and paste it onto the background layer. This way, we'll generate a bit of contrast between this scene and the transition, so they don't have exactly the same coloration. Right-click, and I'm going to create an adjustment layer called Lux. This time, I'm going to use a paid plugin from Red Giant called Magic Bullet Lux, and it's truly a fantastic plugin. You can achieve incredible colorizations. We go to Edit to access the plugin interface. Here, we go to Lux. Look at all the presets we have. As I said before, you can achieve very cinematic results. Here we have some different ones. For this tutorial, I'm going to use one from Blockbuster HDR called Cooler Heads. Also here in the tools, I'm going to add a couple of effects. First, this one called Optical Diffusion, which gives a bit of overall brightness to the entire scene. But I'm going to lower this value a bit. I'll leave it at 19% to make it more subtle. I'm also going to add the chromatic aberration effect. And in this option, we'll set the value to 1.1. And that's how we get that RGB effect that looks really cool and affects the entire scene. If you want, you can also add this effect called soften edges, which blurs the edges of the scene to draw more attention to the central area. Here, I'm going to set the size to 1. When we're happy with the correction we've made, click Validate, and that's it. Finally, we'll select all the layers and activate Motion Blur. Well, it's not necessary for nulls and adjustment layers. If you want, you can also add a vignette effect to darken the edges a bit. And now, our scene is finished and working perfectly. If you get stuck at any step or there's something you don't understand, let me know in the comments and I'll fix it. And if you like the tutorial, leave me a big thumbs up so I know. See you in the next video.